Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen. So hello and welcome to another Ancestral Kitchen podcast. I usually start off by saying hello to Andrea, but sadly Andrea is not with us this week. But I do have another guest, so I will say hello to Naomi instead of Andrea. Hello, Naomi.
Hello.
So Naomi is in Slovakia, and we wanted her to come onto the podcast and talk in particular about the food traditions in Slovakia, and specifically the food traditions around pigs and what happens when the pig is butchered and all the wonderful foods that are made from it. As you know, if you've listened, I usually start off by asking Andrea what she had for breakfast, because that's her last meal. And Naomi's in the same time zone as me. We're both in the European time zone. So I'm assuming, Naomi, your last meal was lunch. Is that right?
Yes.
And what did you have?
Well, it requires a bit of explanation.
That's good. We like that.
So I wanted to make, so today in Slovakia is a bank holiday, statutory holiday.
Oh.
So I had a little bit more time. And I wanted to make a Slovak dish called strapacki. It's they have these potato dumplings that you pan fry with sauerkraut and bacon. So, and I wanted to try a sourdough version of these halushki, the potato dumplings. But I didn't have I didn't have time. I didn't put it together. I was going to use a starter, and I didn't have enough starter for the potatoes that I had grated. So I turned that into potato pancakes. And I used, instead of flour, I used the sourdough starter, and it worked really well.
Wow.
And then instead of the potato dumplings, what I've done before is I mixed bacon and sauerkraut and I baked it in the oven with various bits and bobs of vegetables. So there was some potatoes, some yams, some cauliflower, celery root, and bake that in the oven, and it was delicious. And
so your whole family was there eating it because it's a holiday?
Yes, okay. We're all here at home today.
And I've got loads of questions about this already. The pancakes that you did, was the potato pre-cooked, or did you grate it in raw?
No, I grated it raw, but on the fine bowls.
Nice.
And put some salt and the sourdough starter, and that kept it and an egg or two. And that kept it together enough to stay as a pancake. And
then you fried it in cast iron in a cast iron pan? Yeah,
I had a cast iron pan with lard. And then a trick I learned from my husband is, so whenever I don't fry foods very much, but something that they do here is when they deep fry, Slovaks love schnitzel. Deep fried breaded pork cutlets.
Yeah.
And when they make it, they put instead of, most people, like when you read in English, they say to put paper towel on the bottom of a plate, and you put it all on the plate, and everything gets soggy and it's gross. So instead, they get a casserole dish, and they put old bread on the bottom of it, and then on the side of the casserole dish, you can put them not laying flat, but on the edge. And then the grease will drip down into the bread, and things stay nice and crisp instead of getting soggy.
And then you eat the bread, obviously.
Yeah.
Yum.
Well, I will, because it's my sourdough bread.
Yeah.
if you use like old stale bread from the store or something, then no. But yeah.
Nice. And then, so with the pancake, did you put the stuff from the oven on top of it, or was it served separately?
I just served it separately.
Okay. And to put sauerkraut, I've always wanted to make these dishes with loads of sauerkraut in the oven or in the slow cooker, but we never really make enough sauerkraut to feel like I feel justified in putting
Uh,
tons of it into a stew. How much sauerkraut do you make?
well, I'm going to admit something here. I didn't actually make the sauerkraut.
Okay.
It's possible sauerkraut is a staple here, and if
I
you get there's
see.
certain brands have preservatives in them, but certain brands don't. So I buy the ones without preservatives, and yeah, I do
And
make it, but I
are there a
generally
reasonable price, or because here there are sauerkrauts around, not as much as I imagine in Slovakia, but you have to go out of your way to find one that's not that
I don't
actually has
know.
live bacteria in it. And then when you find one with live bacteria in it, it costs the earth. So I'm wondering whether it's different there.
Okay. I'm sorry to admit this, but I bought it at Tesco.
Oh, you have Tesco in Slovakia.
Yes, we have Tesco, and they have quite a few kind of local foods.
Okay.
And sauerkraut, it's in a bag. Although
Oh,
sometimes they have other things have them in buckets. Yeah, it's like a sealed bag,
okay.
and yeah,
Nice.
I do make sauerkraut, but usually that one it's a lot more. It doesn't usually. If I just do it in a jar instead of a big
Mm,
crock, then it doesn't
mm.
get soft enough. And this one has obviously fermented for a lot longer and is
And
softer.
what is it? Last Christmas I did a dish with whole fermented cabbage leaves where I rolled pork mince in them, and then I put them in a dish, put them in the oven. I put sauerkraut around it, not much. Um, and I'm wondering, when you put sauerkraut in that quantity in stews or in something that you're cooking in the oven, does it taste? How different does it taste to normal cabbage? And why do people do it instead of using normal cabbage?
Well, the why people do it,
Mm,
sauerkraut was just a staple around here for it has been forever, and it was Slovakia is traditionally a very agrarian culture, and so it
mm.
was something it was already cut, it was already made. You just throw it in a pot, and boom, it was already done
I
in the
see.
winter. Um, the taste when you cook sauerkraut, it mellows, so it still tastes like sauerkraut. It doesn't taste like fresh
Mm,
cabbage, but it mellows, and I think it's a really good way if someone wants to start eating sauerkraut and it's too
mm.
strong for them. It's a really good way to work into it to start with it because it does mellow, and especially if you mix it with potatoes or grains or some sort of it kind of and also bacon because bacon just makes everything taste good.
Yeah,
Uh,
I get that.
but it really mellows the acidity. So it's a great way to start uh, eating sauerkraut.
Okay. I love the fact that it's literally from what you described there. It sounds like expediency. It's already chopped. It's in a big vat. You've got tons of it, and so why wouldn't you use it in a stew? Because you've got to chop a cabbage if you've got more cabbage in your stores,
Yeah,
whereas this sauerkraut's already done. And the idea of having that amount sauerkraut around and part of life is, the equivalent now is a bag of pre-chopped mushrooms or pre-chopped carrots from the
right. Yeah,
supermarket, whereas that is a fabulous example of just fermented foods just at the heart of food culture because it's just easier to
I
put them. Mm.
Oh, absolutely. So this year I still want to do it. I do want to do a big crock because it's the first year I have somewhere to put it. We moved before I was in an apartment, and while we did have a
Mm.
basement room, my husband wasn't up for all the neighbors complaining about the smell of a sauerkraut crock, which was I can see. So, but my mother-in-law, for example, for years she had a big, huge crock, and it would sit in the living room until it started to bubble and it was warm, and then they put it downstairs. It was really heavy.
How
Uh,
big?
oh gosh, I think metric now, but like 20,
Yeah,
30
yeah.
liters. I don't know. It's really big.
Wow.
Let's say
Okay, I don't
20,
know what
20
that I don't
liters.
know what that is in.
At 20 liters divided by four is 20 liters is like 20 quarts. So it's
Wow,
five
huge.
gallons.
And how long would that
Yeah, really big.
last?
For her, the winter, and she would.
Okay.
We also there's also a stew. It's also used a lot for a stew called segedinski, which is the name. The original segedinski goulash comes from Hungary, but apparently the Slovak version is completely different than the Hungarian version.
Okay.
But it's a stew that has a lot of meats in it and also cream. And so
Mhm.
that's another one. The cream also kind of tempers the acidity of the sauerkraut.
Yeah, I've never tried sauerkraut and cream together, but I'd like to. As you know, I
Yeah,
want to come
if
and visit you.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Yeah, no, the well, as you were saying about the expediency of fermented foods, I mean, a lot of their foods were, when you're working on if you have a farm, you don't
Mm.
okay, there's more time in the winter, but you need kind of those quick foods. So something like sauerkraut, and I've done it myself. I've made a big, huge, maybe it would take me most of the day to make this huge jar of kimchi or something, but then I throw
Mm.
it in the fridge and I can pull it out at any time. And there's like vegetables, because to make a salad actually takes quite a while, by the
Yeah,
time you cut everything and yeah,
nice.
if you have some sourdough bread and some sauerkraut and something hanging from your pig butchering, then you have dinner
You're
right
done.
there.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
of course now uh, e- everyone's kind of says, well, you've got to eat your sauerkraut raw because of the biotics in it. But the scientists now are showing that the paraprobiotics and the postbiotics in cooked fermented foods are incredibly valuable to our health.
yeah,
And so there's just ancestral wisdom just going back and back there, just as part of life, that those microbes were doing amazing things to ensure the health of everyone who was eating them.
exactly. And
Amazing.
even, I mean, it's fermenting vegetables. Slovakia is kind of in this weird place where people still remember like their grandmothers fermenting a lot, and now it's coming back as something kind of new. So there's maybe, it's not like people who fermented a long time ago and now it's coming back as a trend. There's a lot
Mm,
shorter of a kind of time period in there.
okay.
But my sister-in-law's mother, she remembers going swimming in the summer, and the snack that you could buy was fermented pickles. Like
Wow.
that's what you bought for a snack at the swimming pool.
How long ago was that?
Uh 40 years ago,
Okay, not
maybe.
that long. Okay. Wow. I think we are going to be focusing on a pig at some point during this podcast, but I think perhaps we have to have you back to talk about fermenting. So my lunch was not as interesting as yours. It was a sheep stew. Our farmer has sheep, mature, not lamb, which are completely grass fed. And his cattle aren't completely grass fed because it's very difficult in the terrain that we're in to completely grass feed them. But the sheep are. And so when these sheep become available, I'm like, oh, can I buy a whole sheep? I want a sheep. And it's such a wonderful, strong flavour because it's a, an older animal, and I stew it. And because we're coming close to winter now, I've got all the greens around. So I had onion and cabbage and cavolo nero and lots of different spices in there. I put cinnamon in because sheep it seems to have a real affinity with kind of warm spices. So I like to
Mm-hmm.
put something in there that makes it even warmer. It brings out that flavour.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that with two types of sourdough bread. One was spelt with some spent rye grain, which I used to make beer and then dehydrated and ground into flour. And the other one was a loaf that I just cooked with a milk kefir starter. The crust was so amazing, I couldn't not have a slice of it, even though there was other bread left in the bread bin. So
Crust
I
is the
cut
best
that
part.
um, with lard and with some sauerkraut. I wonder, do you have sheep in Slovakia? Is that something that's eaten traditionally or not?
Yes,
Mm,
but so sheep are the center of the country is full of sheep.
okay.
Um, Milk, but they're kept mainly for the milk. So
I see.
milk, sheep milk products are a big thing, or have been. And now it is, however, very hard to buy lamb or sheep meat because all the lamb gets exported to Italy.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So it's
Gosh.
actually, like in the spring, Easter or something, I'll be looking.
Yeah.
It's hard to find.
Wow. It's it's just crazy because I mean sheep can grow here,
It,
as most people know that Italy and parts of Italy particularly are famous for sheep milk cheese and products like that. Pecorino is an example of it. And so there are sheep closer to home than Slovakia for us for sure. It's
yeah,
interesting.
I don't know.
Wow.
That's the market for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But but people are very cautious, at least in the West where I live. It seems like a lot of people are cautious about uh, the taste and smell of it. I grew up on mutton. I love mutton,
Mm.
but a lot of people here are a little bit hesitant about it.
Okay.
So,
Because it's different,
mm.
because it's strong.
Yeah, yeah, especially like lamb. I've been with people when they had lamb and they were surprised that it wasn't strong. But I don't mind strong mutton, and that was
Mm.
like it's too much for my husband.
Yeah, yeah. I've stopped using the word mutton, because I tried to find the kind
Aha,
of word for the word mutton in Italy, and that there is no word, it's just sheep. And so I think I've just been
aha.
conditioned into calling it sheep. There's a separate word for lamb, but there's no separate word for mutton. It's just sheep.
Either lamb or a sheep.
Yeah. Let's take a step back because although I know you, not everyone listening will know you. So um, I tried to remember before we started recording how I met you originally. I've never met you in real life. And I think it was when I was back in England and either I was just about to have my son Gabriel or I just had my son Gabriel. And I seem to remember it had something to do with Katie Bowman, the movement specialist. And I think you'd potentially written a blog post about her or something to do with her, or that we
I
connected around that somehow. You remember?
so I wrote a blog post for not my own blog, but for someone else about I think it had to do with sitting.
Yeah, maybe that
I
was it.
think yeah.
And
Um,
then I went to nose at your own blog, and then I saw these amazing photographs and recipes, and I was just hooked, I think. And
oh,
anyone, I
thank
mean,
you.
we'll link your blog, but anyone who wants to who gets excited by traditional recipes and beautiful photography would love to go and have a look at your site. So you've been in Slovakia, I think you told me 16 years. Is
Yeah,
that right?
coming up 17. Yeah.
And you have 4 children, and your husband's
Yes.
Slovakian, yeah?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you came from, because you aren't Slovakian yourself, and why you're in Slovakia and how your life is there?
Ooh, so I grew up in Canada, small town in the Rocky Mountains. Uh, as regards to food, we always ate a little bit differently because my father is Japanese. So we would often get packages from family and friends in Japan, and we also ate um, just. I remember looking in a pot, excuse me, in a pot of hijiki seaweed with tofu and saying to my mother, it's my father who's Japanese, but my mother really embraced it, and saying to my mother, friends are coming over tomorrow. Can we have lasagna? Something normal. Now, of course, I'm very proud of it, but that really, and my mother was also, I'm so grateful she never, in the 80s and 90s, she never fell for the low fat craze.
Mm,
She was always about butter and real food. She was real food before there was a real food movement.
yeah.
Um, on a farm, we personally, when I was younger, we didn't have. I mean, we just had hobby like chickens and garden and stuff. But my extended family, we all lived on like one big side of the mountain. My extended family had sheep for years. And then my parents got cattle. And the sheep, they sold the sheep in a couple years in between, and then my parents got cattle. And yeah, we've always eaten things like eating organs or eating weird grains or something is just what I grew up with.
And why do you think your mum was like that?
Partly she was kind of partly hippie, natural person. She also spent, not sure how much time, but quite a bit of time up north, living with Native people. And so, we had Canadian Thanksgiving is in October, and my husband was trying to ask me like a memorable Thanksgiving. And one Thanksgiving we had this big old moose head that that cooked above the fire outside, and that was our Thanksgiving meat. And she said that was a very like a normal thing when she lived up there with the indigenous people up north. Okay. Yeah, so if we had a moose head, it was memorable, but it happened.
Yeah.
And then I went to university. I met my husband, or who's now my husband.
You went to university in Canada?
I was 1 year in Canada, and then in the United States, in Michigan, for 3 years. Okay. And my last semester was in Austria on a study abroad. And by that time, we were engaged, I think. Yeah, we were engaged by the end of that semester, and he wanted me to come to Slovakia just to see what it was like, so I could understand him better. And yeah, stayed here. Wow. Now I have 4 children. The last 2 are twins. We lived for years in a flat and have just moved to a house, which I absolutely love because now I can have a garden. Yay. Although I am admittedly a terrible gardener.
You have time and space now to expand and to learn.
Love the space.
Yeah, maybe not the time with 4 kids.
I am now, just the last 6 months or so, I started working in a restaurant. I'm a home cook. I'm not a trained cook, but I came there because he was looking for someone who knew about foraging. And I gave some foraging tours locally. That's another thing that both my parents did. That was normal for us, was picking stinging nettle or other things from the forest.
So from a food perspective, what is Slovakia like, and what is the landscape like? I've never been there, and I expect a lot of people who are listening haven't. Try to paint us a picture, if you can, of what the landscape's like.
So the landscape is the southern part is fairly flat, but a lot of the country is hilly or mountainous. The hilly areas, especially, is where traditionally there's been a long history of shepherding of sheep. The food is very Central European. So it's a lot of potatoes, a lot of bread, a lot of sauerkraut, very heavy foods. Soup is a staple here. People have soup. Traditionally they had it every day for lunch. During communism, a lot of things, the food changed a little bit in that, for example, so Wiener Schnitzel is a big celebratory food here, but there wasn't very much meat then, so then you make like the same thing but with cheese, an Edam cheese, or a lot of mayonnaise-based salads, canned things if you can get fresh, or things like that. But yeah, Traditionally, there was a lot more beans, I think, used, beans and grains. I remember I was talking to one older lady who lived in this town, and there was, in a town of, I don't know, a couple thousand people, there was something like 7 mills or something.
Wow.
Everybody had their own, and this is in her lifetime.
Mm.
Everybody, and they don't exist anymore though.
Okay.
Everybody had a patch. The town is together, and this is still set up like this even in farming areas. The town is together, people all live together, and then the fields surround the town. So people don't have necessarily a lot of yard space in their yard next to their house, but then they would have these patches in the fields um, outside of town. Communism actually really destroyed that because all the farms were centralized
I
and
see.
aggregated. So you actually had to give your cow to the communist farm aggregate, and you literally lost your cow, and then you had to like buy milk. So it really changed that. It was very small family farms, subsistent farming, and it became in the West, especially in the West now, it's, huge fields and big, massive machinery. In the center of Slovakia and in the East, I haven't been so much, but there are a lot more, still more kind of family farming, subsistence farming.
Do you think that those huge fields and machines are a kind of a legacy of how it was logistically during communism, or are they something that's come since then?
Logistically, since communism,
Okay.
because it was all the land belonged to everybody. It's actually quite complicated because the land belonged to everybody, and so they maybe built a farm, or they started built even, a school or an apartment building, and then communism ended and the land went back to the original owner, but there was a school on it, or there's a farm on it, a state farm on it now. And so it's it's actually quite complicated.
When did communism fall there?
1980. Actually, that's why we have statutory holiday. Today is 1989.
Okay, so a long time ago, but the effects of it seem like they are some part of the culture and will be, moving forward for a long time.
Yeah, when my husband wanted me to move here so that I understood him better, it is definitely not something I could have understood just from reading books. Partly, it has changed a lot in the last 17 years that I've been here, but there's certain mindsets that come from that. There are logistic things like land and farming. There's there's a lot of and behavioral things that kind of that get passed on, and people don't even realize it.
Yeah, it's just part of the kind of tapestry of what the culture is.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a big difference even between young people, say my nieces and nephews who are a generation younger, and even my husband. Even between those two generations, there's quite a difference.
And how do you feel, as someone who grew up in Canada and knowing that world and that environment, and then having, literally shifted your life to a completely different world? I know it's kind of like asking which child is your favourite, but do you miss Canada? Do you prefer Slovakia? How do you feel about those two places in juxtaposition in your life?
I always say every place has its pros and cons. There's no perfect place, and there are things I love about Canada and things that are frustrating there, and there are things I love about Slovakia and that are frustrating here. Often very different things, but I am a small town girl. I am a mountain girl. The town we live in has hills behind it, so that was I couldn't quite do the plains, but so yeah, I grew up. When you're a kid and you grow up, it's just whatever life you have is normal. That's all you know. And now when I look back, the I did have a very unique childhood, I think, and So I definitely miss a lot of aspects of that, of course, family, and also that kind of wilderness nature environment that I grew up in. Um, but we do a lot of hiking here. We do get out. There is of a lot of beautiful places in Slovakia, and culture, a lot of cultural things that we can access here that are not possible were not possible in my little hometown.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you when you say that there's pros and cons to every place. When when I tell people that I live in Italy, it's easy for people to think, oh, Italy, it's wonderful and it's sunny and the language and the food. And it is, it's wonderful in some ways. And it's really, really frustrating and annoying and difficult in other ways.
Yeah.
And, going and living in a place is really the only way you get to learn that every place has its bonuses, but also every place has its frustrations as well. You're so right.
Yeah, exactly.
So the the reason that you're here today is supposed to be to talk about Slovakian pig butchering. So I think we better move on to that. There's I heard you originally talking about this on another podcast that was a Slovakian based podcast, so kind of a tourism podcast about Slovakia and its landscape and its cultures. But I've also read the blog post on your site where you describe the butchering process and what happens on that day and the foods that come from it. And I was amazed to understand the kind of the wealth of different foods and how it is all prepared literally that day, how much work is done
Mm-hmm.
and the array of
Mm-hmm.
different foods and the fact that literally the entire pig, apart from I read the toenails, is used. And I wondered if it would just be wonderful for you to be able to share with us, your living experience of that tradition. And maybe start by giving us a bit of background. So, what time of year is it? Who does it? Why does it happen? And how does it happen? Before we actually get onto the specific dishes, we could just have a background of what happens during this period and how and why.
So, pig butchering is one of those for years. Everybody had a pig in their backyard. Um, this is something that is kind of slowly dying out as people get older,
Mm.
but or that the generation that kept them gets older, I should say.
Yeah.
Uh, totally lost my train of thought.
So you were saying how about everyone has one in their backyard?
Everyone had a yes, and so some people did it themselves, and
Mm.
some people hired a butcher
Mm-hmm.
who would come there. It's and often they would call because it wasn't mechanized. Then you would call people to come help. So you call your family, your friends, and it was kind of a big get together and lots of not only things to prepare, but also just manually lifting
Mm-hmm.
a sometimes very large and heavy pig, lifting it up to hang it. And so the day before it would be, sorry,
That's okay.
I totally blanked, totally blanking on this answer.
What time of year is it
Uh,
done usually? Is it a
aha.
winter thing, like January?
So, so it's usually December, January,
Okay.
even November. At least, so it's chilly. So you do it outside, but it's usually relatively cold, so that because they do let the meat that they do keep, they let it sit overnight and cool down, and so
Okay.
you need it's easiest if it's cool outside.
And how old is the pig? Has it been raised for a long time or is it a young pig?
Usually like
Okay.
a yearling.
And so then it happens every year, or that's what would have happened, that you have
Yes.
one pig for the year and then you slaughter that pig and use it to cook all manner of things. And then what a family would get another pig for the following year.
So I think there was a couple ways that, yeah, you could either the way at least that my in-laws did it was they would buy a piglet in the spring and then butcher it in the fall.
Okay. And then it's just running around in the garden during that time and eating what's available to it, or is it fed something specific?
Well, a lot of people, unfortunately they didn't run around very much. They kept them in small confines so that they would have more fat.
Okay, yeah.
But there is a farmer in the village next to me who is this weekend. He's there. He has it's a heritage breed called Manglanica in Slovak.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an a Hungarian heritage breed, and he does have them outside and they run around. They feed them scraps, of course, also some grain, and they also they would have these large gardens, and at least half of the garden almost would be something like a turnip. It's not the same turnip that we would eat, but some kind of turnip. And they have these large the best way to describe it is like a circular grater. And so they take these turnips or maybe some other like pumpkins or squashes, other hard, things that last through the winter, and turn this. There'd be a handle that you could turn and the vegetables would go through this grater, and then they feed them that as well.
Okay. So tell us how the day proceeds, the actual day of the slaughter, and then what's cooked. How does it start?
So the day starts, it starts the day before. You wash a lot of pots.
Okay.
And set up. So they have these basically like a very large cauldron that sits in a barrel, and on the if you imagine like a metal barrel, and the towards the bottom there's a grate, and you build a fire on there, and then this cauldron sits in it. It's 30 to 50 liters, let's say 50 liters. They're quite large, and the first thing that's done is early in the morning. You light a fire under them and fill them with water and get the water boiling.
Okay.
There'd be at least two of these. There's a little stovepipe from the back of it. And the water needs to be hot. So when you come, and also a fair amount of a fair amount of fruit schnapps is also consumed during this process. It's like an integral part of it.
Yeah.
Then they butcher the pig. The way that they did it now is you give it a shock and then slit the throat. So you shock it, it's out, it's not struggling. But you slit the throat and you collect the blood in a bucket.
Okay.
And as the blood is pouring out, you have to have your hand in there and you're stirring this bucket of blood so that it doesn't coagulate very much. Yeah. Or to lessen the coagulation. And then you need to clean it so that with this hot water, you wash it, you scrub it, burn off the hair, scrub it again, do this a couple times. Then hang it and start cutting it.
And how many people are there when that's happening? How is it, like family and extended family and friends, or not many?
Depends how big your family is. You need at least 3 strong people to who are strong enough to kind of pick up this pig and hang it. You put there'd be a bar somewhere and hooks that you hook through the tendons, like the Achilles, or what would be an Achilles, and hang it upside down. And then there's always lots of pots to wash. There's my parents-in-law would hire a butcher. He would come, and so he would do the main, like, gutting and cutting, and he would kind of order everyone around, and everyone else just did what he said to do, basically.
So then once the pig's hung, is it cut straight away?
The inside is cut, the guts are taken out, and the organs, and all the organs, and then pieces start going into one of these cauldrons. So you have these 2 cauldrons. You've used some of the water to wash the pig.
Yeah.
but then bones go in one and organs go in another one.
All the organs together?
And yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I might not be 100% accurate on this, but pretty sure they all go in there. And those start cooking. And meanwhile, he cuts up the rest of the pig and kind of divides takes off the bone. They don't have very many cuts where they leave the bone in, so most of it is the bone is off. Those go not all the bones go in the cauldron, but a good amount, and I couldn't really say what that amount that is. But the head, including the head goes in there, the ears, the various bits and bobs. And then the first thing then is lunch, and the first thing that you make is something called mozgi, which mozog means brain in Slovak. And so you take the brain and the spinal cord and make this dish. You fry up, kind of caramelize a lot of onions and paprika. What else goes in there? Some of the meat you'd just take a chunk of muscle meat and grind it up and throw it in, eggs, and then you would eat it with pickles and bread for lunch.
Okay. And the brain and the spinal cord are in that too? Yes,
it's mixed in there.
Okay.
That would be the first meal, or like the lunch. And then you take you have a stove available somewhere. My parents-in-law have like a wood cook stove in their basement, and you cook a big thing of rice, and you start the organs that were cooking in one of the cauldrons. You take them out and grind. So not all of them, but a good amount of them can be ground, and you make into a sausage called yatenichki. The different areas also have there's kind of like dialect names for it. And so it ends up, it's like this rice and organ sausage with a lot of marjoram and garlic and some other herbs. And you would never be able to tell that it was full of organs.
What does it taste like?
Ooh, marjoram.
Yeah, the herbs.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's a lot of marjoram and garlic. It's kind of rice. It's very fatty. And yeah, I don't think I can describe the taste.
So it's put into the casings from the intestine, is it?
Yes, although we would often buy the casings because cleaning it out is a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a hard job. And then is it fried or is it boiled?
You bake them.
Oh, it's baked. Okay.
Yeah, so you dip it in some broth. You dip it in more broth, so it's kind of covered in more. It shrinks the casing a little bit and is covered in more fat. And then we often froze them. And I absolutely love this food because I can literally take it from my freezer, throw it in my oven, and have dinner in 20 minutes.
Yeah, because it's got the rice in as well. Exactly. So it's a whole...
Yeah, it's got the rice in it. It's got the organs. It's got some, maybe a little bit of meat, but not a lot of like muscle meat. And you just bake it until it's crispy and warmed through, and there's dinner. It's excellent with some fermented vegetables. Kind of goes well with the fattiness.
The richness. Yeah, it sounds delicious. And is that recipe one of the ones that you've documented?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, okay. So if I get hold of some organs, which I do quite regularly, it's something that I could try to recreate here.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so keep going. Tell us what happens next.
Another thing that goes into the cauldrons it translates to the underchin. So I think it's the area, I'm guessing, from under the chin that is pure fat, and it's like a big hunking chunk of fat. It gets boiled, and then they pull it out of the cauldron and poke it with a mixture of paprika, and minced garlic.
Okay.
And then that. So this is one that I don't love the way it is. I like it if it's a little bit fried, but they would just slice it. They would keep it in the fridge and just slice a piece off and eat it with a piece of bread. I'm not quite there. It wasn't. It's not. It's not salted or smoked or anything. It's just a big hunk of boiled fat with, and the whole, like, they would poke it with this mixture and then also like cover it, in this spice mixture.
So the flavors of the spices and the garlic go into the fat. So it's kind of it's
Yeah.
got another flavor, but it's not something like, for example, the equivalent
Not a
would
heck
be
of a lot.
lardo in Italian, which is very flavored because it's left for 6 months with all those spices on it, and it's not cooked to start with. I remember when I went to Russia, I had chunks of fat which didn't have any of kind of flavorings on them. They weren't cured, and I think perhaps they were done in a similar way. But I haven't had boiled fat at any other time other than that.
Yeah, it's a great winter food. It's really like full of energy and would keep you full for a long time. But not my palate wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah. Okay, so what happens to the rest of the fat? The back fat and the belly fat and the other bits of
So
fat.
then he the well, when you cook the rice, you use a lot of this water that the organs have been cooking in. And then so one of the cauldrons is emptied, and then you use that cauldron to make lard in.
I see.
So all the fat gets chopped up, skin off, and also the skin goes in these in one of the other cauldron that's still bubbling away.
Okay.
And you yeah, and so it's someone, you need a person. This is why you need so many people, is because you need a person to be stirring the lard fairly regularly.
Yeah, so it doesn't burn.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it just bubbles there for, I don't know how long, a long time.
So I've made the recipe that you have for the kind of the biscuity scone things with the cracklings from the lard in it. And the idea, I mean, we make lard here and we love the flavour of the bits that are left over. So that lard, when it goes in the cauldron, it's chopped up into small bits, is it?
They're actually pretty, it depends on the type. Like there's some fat is quite thick and chunky, and those are smaller, but then there's some thin fat, and that will be like a bigger piece. But they're not tiny pieces. They're actually relatively thick. And when they drain the lard off, the cracklings that are left they're still, like, theoretically you could still get more fat out of them. They're still quite
okay.
Yeah, they're not like super hard. They're fairly soft, and they do a lot of things with them. One is, so they grind them up, and you can use them to make these, I guess, biscuits. So it's a yeasted dough that I've made with sourdough, and to make it, you put this ground cracklings in between the layers, like, and to what do you call it?
To like laminate it.
Laminate it, yeah. To laminate, you laminate the dough with this ground cracklings. But they also use it to make spreads for bread. So you might boil an egg and grate that up, or chop it up, and grated carrot, and mix it with the cracklings. And there's all kinds of recipes or maybe a pickles or something.
So you leave the cracklings as they are rather than make them into the paste like you would for the cookies?
No, you'd make them into the paste.
So you still have the paste.
And so you still have the paste, and the paste would act almost like mayonnaise or something. It would be the kind of the binder for the spread.
Okay, and then what happens to the lard? That's not used as a spread?
No, that's used, that's put in big metal I don't even know, big metal containers. I don't know what I would call them in English. And then that's used throughout the winter for cooking, for all these Wiener Schnitzel. Yeah, I don't think there's any particular special thing that they do with the lard.
And do people still use lard as a main cooking fat now, or is that changing?
I think it changed, and it's maybe going back a little bit.
Okay.
So at least, yeah, people are starting to use it more. But I mean, vegetable oils are used a lot.
Yeah. I'd absolutely heartily recommend having a go at that the lard crackling paste biscuit things. I don't know what's the proper name for them, Naomi.
I'm sitting here trying to think, and I'm totally blanking out.
Because there's so many accents in Slovakian language that I just don't know where to start when I try and pronounce something, because I don't know what the accents mean
right,
at
of
all.
course. Actually, Slovak is exceedingly easy to learn to read the accents, or you can learn the accents in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
But give me a minute.
They are absolutely beautiful. I did it with sourdough, like you said you've done, and with spelt. And I've done it more than once. And there's usually a fight in our house for cracklings, but I've managed to say no. We're making these things with them, and Gabriel absolutely loves them. He says, I want those lardy crackling scone things with extra lard on the top for my birthday. Because the lamination means they go sort of strated with this beautiful, the soaking up of the crackling flavour into the bits of dough. And they're they are absolutely wonderful. And I froze some of them as well, and they came out, just as good when I defrosted them. And so I'd recommend that recipe's on your site as well. I'd recommend if anyone likes baking and has access to those cracklings, it's something that's definitely worth trying, because it tastes heavenly.
It does. I remember. They're called, so pagac is the word for these kind of biscuity scone things, but there's all different kinds of pagac. You can have potato or cheese or various flavors. And the kind with the cracklings in them are called oshkvarkové pagac.
Okay.
And and there's even within, I have one recipe on my blog that's kind of a softer dough, but I've also had them the same, using the same lard cracklings, had it, the more cracklings in lard you use, the more kind of crispy it is. I've had some that are kind of more crispy and even more layered.
Wow.
These ones are a softer one, and so pagac.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so we've got the bones are in the water, the lard's been either boiled, or the fat's been boiled or made into lard, and we've got the organs in the sausage with the rice. Where do we go next?
So what's next? Another thing that they make, so the blood that was kept in the bucket that was stirred with the arm, it becomes black pudding. That's usually, so you can either make blood sausages or blood pudding. I personally much prefer the blood pudding, because the black pudding, because the blood sausages have this kind of a texture that I'm not totally into. It's kind of almost like crystalline or something. I don't know. But the black pudding is lovely. It is really good. So this cauldron is filled with cracked barley and some of this broth, and the blood, and probably marjoram. Marjoram seems to go in a lot of things.
Okay.
And that is another thing. So you need another person to stir this so it doesn't burn. And and it's just cooked until it kind of reaches this pudding consistency. This is something that doesn't keep very well, and it doesn't freeze very well. So they put this into bowls, and it's something that you share with the neighbors.
Okay. And
Um,
it's eaten like a kind of a porridge consistency, is it?
yeah, and they'll warm it up. Sometimes they'll crack an egg into it and kind of scramble it.
Mhm.
Um, I like it. I like it though. I actually really like it cold. But it's also really nice. You can, yeah, mix an egg with it and warm it up.
And I
It
don't know.
changes.
Go on.
Oh, it's just it changes consistency a fair amount if it's warm or cold.
Yeah. I don't know how many people listening have tasted blood. I wonder if you could talk about how that tastes.
It does not taste like when you have a bleeding nose. I can tell you that. It doesn't have that metallic taste. Gosh, it's so hard to describe taste. If
Yeah.
taste,
Yeah.
it's. I'm sorry, dear listeners. I'm really bad at describing this. You're just gonna have to come and try
Yeah,
it.
I know. I think that we need kind of educate. I feel like often I need an education on how to describe taste because I've got a few words that I use, but it they never seem to do justice to the thing that I'm actually
No.
experiencing in my mouth. And one day I will find a book or study one of those kind
Yeah.
of round chart things that has all the different flavors that go round and try to understand how I can describe flavors a bit more because yeah, or maybe I'll just
Let me know when you
listen.
find that book.
Yeah, I'll share it with you. I'll share it with everyone when I do. Okay, yeah.
It's a very gentle taste. Like it's not sour, it's not bitter. Um, I wouldn't exactly call it sweet, but it's just a very. I think it's a very gentle flavor.
It sounds like a
When it's
comfort
in the
food, that one. Sounds really comforting.
yeah, it's when it's I've had blood sausage a couple times, and it's a different taste than the blood sausage.
Mm.
I think even though the blood is like a common ingredient, it has a much softer flavor, and it has a soft consistency. That's that's the best I can
No,
do.
that's good.
It's
Thank you.
it's not meaty. Like it's not. You don't feel like you're eating meat
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it doesn't have a meaty flavor.
yeah. Okay. Okay, so what's left from the butchering and the cooking and the cauldrons? What happens next?
So so another thing they make is
Mm.
plachenka or head cheese, but they don't. Or I think in Britain they call it brawn.
Yeah.
But it uses more than just the head. So these you use the broth that the head and other bones have been cooking in, and some more of the organs. I think the tongue often goes in here,
Hmm.
the heart, um, even some of the maybe the lungs. The lungs go into the yatonichka, into the rice sausage.
Okay.
And yeah, I think still a lot of garlic and marjoram. That's all that's coming up.
Mm.
And it goes into these casings. A couple times they made it where they put it into the stomach and then smoked it.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, because the stomach is fairly, it's quite a thick, um, has quite a thick wall. It's not like an intestine casing. It's a thick wall.
Hmm.
Put it in there and they smoked it. But often they put it into kind of this large plastic casing, and it gelatinizes. Is that a
Hmm.
verb?
Yeah, no, it
Um,
is. We'll make it a verb.
and yeah, and then you just slice it and eat it with bread. Um, this one can freeze. You can freeze it.
Hmm.
It's again it's not cured, but it's a very fast. You spend this day making it, and then you just cut off a slice, and there's your protein for the day
Yeah,
and collagen.
yeah, definitely. I'm hoping to do something with the stomach soon. I have a friend here who is Italian but went to Glasgow for the COP summit and got inspired by haggis up there, and who said he might be able to get hold of a sheep stomach here, and did I want to have about making
Ooh.
some haggis with him? And I've never worked with a sheep stomach before, so it will be interesting, and I'll look that up and see that and compare it to haggis, because there's the tradition of haggis in Scotland, which sounds like it is quite similar.
My parents had, I've never had haggis, but my parents had haggis and sushi at their wedding.
Oh, wow. What a mix. That's inspiring. Yes. Wow. Oh, gosh. So if all of these things are being made in one day and it's winter, I'm guessing that it must get dark quite early. What happens? Does literally all of that get done before it gets dark? Or does the garden get lit up by candles? Do people just work in the dark?
Yeah, you either have lights strung up, and we would either do it in kind of this outbuilding. Technically, it's a garage, but it doesn't have a door.
Okay.
So we would either do it there, or if it's really cold, we would move. My parents-in-law have a large basement with kind of a kitchen. I mean, very rudimentary kitchen. There's a wood stove and running water, basically, and set up a table. And I mean, you don't really actually need a lot of fancy equipment. A big table, a couple of knives, and big things to mix for mixing. And that's the majority of what you need. And do you? They also.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if you eat that blood pudding for supper, because you explain what you had for lunch, and then obviously you're still going and you need more food in the afternoon or early evening. What do you eat then?
By the time dinner time comes around, you've been picking at a lot of things, to be honest, because these bits come out of the organs come out of the cauldron, and he'll cut off those. There's usually a little thing of salt, and he'll cut off, I don't know, like a gland, and say, oh, try this gland, and you pop that, and then a piece of this and a piece of that. So by the time dinner time comes around, usually all I want is a salad. But now I don't know if this is particular to the butcher that we had, or if it's a general thing, but he would often bake meat. So he'd take a bunch of various pieces, throw it on a cookie sheet, and with a lot of paprika, I think, is how he did it, and bake some meat. And so there'd be baked meat in the evening. But to be honest, I maybe would have a small piece, but by that time I was pretty full, because I would have been eating glands.
So we haven't actually talked much about the flesh. You've talked about some of it being minced and put in with other dishes, but what happens to the rest of the muscle meat?
Most of the muscle meat then gets frozen.
Okay.
Actually no. So they do also, when you start the whole process, you tell the butcher, or you've decided if you're doing it yourself what you want to do, because there's so many things that you can do. Liver pate is another one. And that one can often get canned. They not so much in glass cans, but in metal cans. And I will tell you a secret. If anybody, and I learned this from the butcher, from my who's at these butcherings, the secret to non-liver tasting liver pate, this even works with beef liver, which is quite strong, is allspice. Wow. If you put some allspice in it, I don't know why, but some chemistry happens and it negates the liver taste. So I do have a recipe on my blog that I made with beef liver, and I highly recommend trying it, because if you feel like, oh, I should eat liver because it's healthy, and you just can't, allspice is the spice to put in.
I think a lot of people do think that. So our show notes are just going to be a massive long list of all your recipes. So we'll put that one in as well.
And then they'll sometimes can meat. So they'll put in a few pieces of skin, and I don't know if they choose what kind of cuts go in there. I wasn't in the deciding process, but they'll often also can it. And so then, again, middle of the winter, you need a quick dinner, you just pull out a can, open it, warm it up, and maybe some rice or something.
And the skin, you said that some of it goes in to be canned, and you talked earlier about some of it going in the one of the cauldrons. Is there something specific done with that, or is it just kind of added to the general, meat portions?
It gets ground up. It gets ground up and put in. Some of it not ground up. Some of it stays as pieces and goes into the head cheese. And some of it gets ground up and goes into the rice sausage.
Right.
There's never any pieces of skin left over, so it gets used up.
Wow. And so at the end of the day, literally, there's nothing left of the pig. Everything's been cooked or canned or frozen or put in something.
Yeah, so they leave or bacon also. They also make bacon.
Yeah, okay.
And the meat and the bones sit out overnight, so it's got to be cold. They sit and let it rest, and then wrap it up and freeze it the next day.
Okay.
Yeah, and that includes, it can be the trotters, pretty much really the toenails, and if we haven't cleaned out the intestines, then the intestines get thrown away, and that's really it.
Wow. And then that is food for the rest of the year traditionally?
Well, it's easier now with freezers, of course.
Yeah.
But this would often, actually, a long time ago, traditionally, weddings were often held in the winter because A, there wasn't so much work to do outside, and B, you could kill a pig and you had all these kind of
feast
celebratory foods to eat. Feast to have. It really depends how big your family is, how long a pig will last. But a family might kill 1 or 2 pigs a year.
And what's your favourite dish out of all the ones that you've talked about, or some you haven't actually told us about from that process? Which thing do you enjoy the most?
Probably the rice sausages.
Okay.
Partly for the taste, and partly they're just so convenient. Yeah. They've really, I can have a real food meal on really quickly, very conveniently. Yeah. And they can there's also klobasa, smoked sausages. You can also make with the muscle meats.
I've heard of them. I think they're. I was going to put them in a soup, a kind of a sourdough soup last year. I think that I read about those sausages.
Yeah, so they have the ones they do here are kind of paprika. I think of paprika as a very Hungarian flavoring, and a lot of it came up here. Okay. So these have a lot of paprika, garlic. Oh, I don't know. There's kind of a long list of herbs and spices that go in it, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And then you have a ratio of fat and muscle meat. Mm-hmm. And then they smoke, and the longer, once you get them back, I mean, the smell of smoked sausages is just so good. And the longer it sits, then the after smoking, the longer it sits, the harder it gets. So sometimes they use them in soups. They use them just boiled or baked. You can throw them in. They have something they call French potatoes, where you layer, it's like a potato gratin kind of, but it's, you can throw those in there. Yeah. Klobasa are a very classic quick food here.
They sound absolutely delicious. So is there anything else about the day and the process that you want to share with us that I haven't prompted or you haven't talked about?
Then you clean up.
Yeah, that's the boring bit.
Yeah, and it's best. My mother-in-law a lot of people would have had a second bathtub. And the second bathtub downstairs, and the second bathtub got used for they actually at Christmas you would buy a carp, and then you would leave the carp in your second bathtub for a couple of days to kind of clean out.
Oh my gosh.
Before you butchered it, like before you killed it.
Oh my Lord. So you have a live carp in a bathtub downstairs waiting for the feast?
Yeah, that was the tradition. I can't say it. It isn't actually one that I've done because I don't love carp, but that was the tradition. But it's also very handy for washing these big pots and things. It's up higher than you would have a normal bathtub. It's kind of on a ledge, and a lot of washing. Hot water is essential because everything's greasy.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I mean, it was the same when I was a child and we had we butchered the sheep. It was that same kind of, lots of people get together, you eat a fair amount. There's often a fair amount of drinking goes on. And not like people aren't, staggering or anything. Well, depends which family you're in. But I just always really, from what I remember as a kid, even though the process was very different, I always really enjoy these kind of get-togethers where a lot of people come together and kind of have a work bee on whatever it might happen to be.
Yeah, that's the next question I was going to ask you. How does it feel? How many times have you done this?
I haven't done it for a couple of years because my in-laws no longer have a pig. They aren't able to keep one anymore. But how many times? Every year for, I don't know, 10 years or something.
Okay. And how does it feel to you? How did it feel to you to be part of that day? What did what memories have you taken from it?
A lot of the memories are of actually stirring the well, it depends. I really loved involving my kids in it.
Yeah.
Once they came along, partly because the whole attitude towards animals and meat, and I want them to realize, to be grateful for where their meat comes from and realize the cost of it, but at the same time in a grateful way rather than in a rejecting way. And and then it's just, it's so much, they loved to help out when they were little, carrying things back and forth or stirring the pot, right, the cauldrons, and then, they have a limited, they would help for quite a while, and then they go, all the cousins would go together and play. It's just, it's hard to say that there's like specific things. It's more just kind of this warm, fuzzy memory of being together in community and connecting over a common goal.
Yeah, I think it's something that the kind of ancestral legacy of doing things like having an animal and slaughtering it, or in the case of perhaps in the case of Italy, having a garden or an orto completely full of tomatoes and needing to make tomato paste for the winter and take the skins off and put them in this bath, and it things and traditions on that scale that involve everyone coming in, whether they be 80 or 8, and helping to do something that will nourish the family for a very long time is so deeply encoded in our history, even if we don't realise that, when we have the opportunity, like you have, to be involved in it, it really leaves nice feelings with us because it feels good,
Yeah, I have the same memories from my childhood, some of butchering, but also of things like haying. And, when I was a kid, we did a lot of things manually and with square bales that we had to stack and now to stuck. And now, my dad can do it with a couple of machines and yeah, it's in one way the efficiency is a lot easier and he wouldn't be able to physically do it now with by himself or to accomplish so much so quickly, but at the same time then you miss out on that kind of the coming together and
it's a kind of a tug of wanting to be efficient and wanting, the fact that he can still do it on his own now with the machines, but also the awareness of what we're losing by not coming together to do these things like we used to once.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how actually this is making me want to kind of start something with my kids because we don't have a pig or a field to hay. And trying to think of how we can incorporate something like this with them. Now I'm trying to think like, what could we do?
Do you cook with them often or not?
Yes. Well, I try to cook with them together on Sundays. That's kind of the day.
Okay.
Get everyone in the kitchen doing different things. And some people, actually quite a few people still will buy a pig. So they won't raise the pig, but they'll buy the pig and do all these butchering things. They'll butcher it themselves.
Okay.
I haven't embraced it so enthusiastically though, because I know the pigs aren't always raised in great conditions. And so if I found a farm that had pigs running around outside, I'd do it in a minute, but that's often not the case. So
would you like to, in the future, now you've got your house, have a pig there? Is that something you consider doing?
Oh, I don't know. Ideally, yes. But they are very stinky and our neighbors might not be so enthusiastic about it. And, we don't have any animals yet. And whether it's a dog or a cat or chickens or a pig, it just requires a different level of, it's just not so easy to pack up and go somewhere.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
Which we don't, it's a commitment. And especially during coronavirus, we're not going anywhere anyway, but when we do go to Canada, we do go for we don't go, so often, but when we do go, we try and go for a longer time. And
that's hard when you have, your family on the other side of the world. It means that, I know that, if Andrea was on the call, she has her animals there, she's going to get more, and it ties her to that land very definitely. And, she has a lot of her family and her friends around her, which is fabulous because it doesn't restrict her. She can still see them and be with them, and they can be with her while she's also looking after her property and also all of the animals that she has. But, when you've got family in another part of the world, it's not so easy.
Yeah. And it, we'll see. Maybe we'll start with some chickens.
Are people still doing the traditional raising of pigs and slaughtering in Slovakia? Are their families still doing it, or is it something that's kind of falling away? Because you said that some of the traditions are coming back, and I'm wondering whether that is too.
A lot of these products you can buy in the store. So if someone gets like a taste hankering for it, of course it's never the same as homemade, but you can buy a lot of them. I do know some families who they don't want to raise the pig, but then they'll buy a grown pig and butcher it. I'm not things like fermenting are coming back, but the meat, I don't know how much of that is coming back.
Yeah, I feel like that's a kind of perhaps what's happening in other parts of the world, in that, in the health food revival that's happening. A lot of people are fermenting. And a lot of fermenting traditions are coming back. But because of the kind of the soup we have of climate change and opinions on growing, on raising animals and the effects that those have on the world, not so many people are embracing traditions that involve animal raising, animal rearing, and that kind of thing, as much as they're embracing kombucha and sauerkraut and pickling and sourdough, So
because it doesn't, those things don't require, you can, if you live in a van, you can have a little jar of sauerkraut on your counter or something, where it's hard to take a pig around with you in your van.
Yeah, exactly. So if someone would want to make one of the recipes, I'd recommend your I've completely forgotten the name, the lard
pagac.
Crackler,
pagac.
I'd recommend that. Can you tell us where people can find those recipes, and if you have one particular that you would like to point people to, so people can go and have a look at them?
So I do have a blog. It's called Almost Bananas. It's a mix. It started out as a food blog, and then it kind of changed more to writing and describing Slovakia, both the traditions and food and landscape and everything. Is there a recipe that I haven't written on there for quite a while?
Okay,
but I keep it up. It's available.
I think there's quite a lot on there. Whenever I go on there and I look at one post, I go down to the bottom and it shows me all these other posts, and I think, I haven't read that one, and I haven't read that one. So there is a wealth of information on there, and there's also a download of, is it Slovakian soups or Slovakian stews?
Yes, I do. Yes, but I think the link is broken, and anything technical makes me want to stick my head in the sand. So I should probably fix that. I do have an ebook of Slovak soups.
Yeah.
Because soup is really a very large part of the culture here. They have a bone broth soup is every Sunday, like that. Even now, that's still very that's still done. And the recipe is, I don't know if I have a favorite recipe on there. One of my favorite foods, the foods I described for lunch, the strapacki with the sauerkraut and bacon. And I have a version of that instead of the potato dumplings. I have a version of that on the blog, just baking it with potatoes.
Oh, okay.
And although you don't really need a recipe for it, it's very kind of like, if you like a lot of sauerkraut, you put a lot. If you're not so sure about it, you just put a little. It's but that's one of my favorite Slovak foods. It's so comforting, and so Slovak food is comfort food. It is not light. It's not really summery food. There's not a lot of Slovak foods I make in the summer, but in the winter, it's peasant food. It's really food that sticks to your bones and gets you, gives you a lot of energy to work in the fields. And it's simple. Like there's a limited repertoire of spices, or you don't need a lot of a lot of them just involve very, very ordinary ingredients. And
thank you. I think it's the right time of the year for it, as we're coming into winter in the Northern Hemisphere at least. And the other thing I wanted to say about your blog was that, even if you don't need a recipe for some of these recipes, it's worth going and checking your recipe, because your photos are beautiful and very atmospheric, and your writing is too. And so, just reading through it, you get a flavour and a taste of the culture and the traditions. And I remember a particularly striking picture on the pig butchering. And I meant to say it when you were talking about getting your children involved. There's a picture there of a youngster kind of involved in the day, holding a part of a pig. And yeah, the rest of your photos are they're really, really beautiful. And the attention to detail
Thank you.
in it. It's
I
worth sitting
really
down
enjoy
with and reading.
blogging. I really enjoy blogging. I would really, really love to get back into it and do it more. But I never wanted to put ads on it or anything. So with limited amounts of time went towards other things. Oh, I do know my favorite blog posts though.
Yeah,
Not necessarily my favorite recipes, but my favorite blog posts. I have 2 blog posts where I go to somebody's house and they show me how to make something. And those are absolutely my favorite ones. They tell me about their life and what it was like growing up here. And I have pictures of just random things in their kitchen. We're in the kitchen and they're showing me how to make something and kind of different things. And those are definitely my favorite blog posts.
What are those
and
titled when we go there? How can we find those?
Probably under, I have headings either Slovakia or recipes, and they both do have recipes. One of them is opantance. It's like a kind of a gnocchi with millet. And then over top, they would put, that's very specific to this area where I'm in. And then they would put it, fry onions on top and bacon. And I added some things of my own, like blue cheese and stuff. And the other one, and she also, the same lady, it's 2 different blog posts though. The same lady also showed me how to make pulled strudel. And then the other lady showed me how to make, it's called slije. They're kind of like a thick noodle. Basically a noodle, but they make them short. And they serve them sweet, they serve them savory, in various ways. But
I'll take a look at those 2 and I'll link those as well.
Okay.
And there's just going to be a feast of reading and looking for people to do. And I hope that you can get back to blogging one day in the future because, it's just a joy to read the posts and I get very excited about all the recipes as well.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I certainly say that, perhaps next year we can have you back on and we can go through a couple of the dishes. You could pick 3 or 4 of your favourite dishes perhaps and we could talk about them and get
for
people
sure.
making them, which would be really good fun. Is there anything else that you want to add before we close? Because, I've noticed the time and we've been talking for quite a while.
Can't think of anything at the moment.
No, okay. So if people want to find you, they can go to your blog. Is it just almostbananas.com or what's the URL?
Almostbananas.net.
.net. Okay, and you're on Instagram as well.
So
what's your handle on Instagram?
I'm on Instagram as almostbananas.
Okay, great.
The title came up because I wanted it related to food, and I had twins that were about 1.5 years old, and so it's a little, also almost crazy. It's supposed to be the.
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I had one aged 1.5, a twins aged 1.5. Wow, I can understand that.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts. And I was like, oh, I'm going to start a blog.
Why not? Like I haven't got enough to do.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you ever so much for your time. It's been wonderful.
I'm so honored that you guys asked me to be here.
Oh.
I feel like there's so many people that are better experts in these kinds of things. So
Not at all.
Yeah.
I really think, I've had so much joy looking at your pictures and your words and making your recipes, certainly. So it's been an honour for us to have you on, and I know that Andrew would say that as well. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth, and Alison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.